The rain poured heavily over Los Angeles, covering the streets in water and making them shine like mirrors. The lights from cars and street lamps reflected off the wet ground, creating a glowing world of color. Raindrops hit the car windows and slid down in zigzag patterns before disappearing into the darkness. The steady sound of rain tapping against the roof of the car was calming, almost like a soft lullaby. Keanu Reeves sat in the passenger seat, feeling exhausted. It had been a long day full of meetings, interviews, and work. All he wanted was to go home, lie down, and rest. He looked outside at the rainy city, trying to let his mind go blank. But something about the car didn't feel right tonight. Benjamin, his driver, held the steering wheel tightly. His hands gripped the leather too hard, his shoulders were stiff, and his breathing was a little heavier than usual. Keanu noticed everything. He was good at paying attention to small details. Benjamin was usually quiet and professional, never talking much. But tonight something was different. His voice had hesitation whenever he answered a simple question. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror again and again, like he was checking for something. Keanu's eyes moved to the dashboard. He noticed small sticky marks, tiny leftovers from tape. It looked like something had been stuck there for a long time and then removed. Maybe a phone holder? Or a toy? Before he could think more about it, his hand brushed against something on the seat beside him. He looked down. A small stuffed teddy bear lay there. It was old, a little dirty, and worn out. Its plastic eyes reflected the soft glow of the dashboard lights. Keanu picked it up and looked at it closely. Strange. He had never seen anything like this in Benjamin's car before. It wasn't there in the morning. He looked up at Benjamin again. The driver's face looked serious, but now Keanu could tell this wasn't just the look of someone who had a hard day. Benjamin was carrying something much heavier. He was hiding something. But what? The rain started to slow down, but the city was still covered in a thin mist. The streets were quieter now, and the sound of tires moving through the wet road echoed in the empty night. Keanu sat in silence as Benjamin drove. Soon they arrived at a familiar spot, a small street near a gas station that stayed open all night. Keanu had noticed this pattern before. Every time Benjamin drove him late at night, he always stopped here. At first, Keanu thought it was just a normal resting spot before Benjamin went home. But tonight, after noticing all the little things, the teddy bear, the tape marks, Benjamin's strange behavior, he started to wonder if there was a bigger reason. Benjamin turned off the engine, but he didn't get out of the car right away. He just sat there staring ahead. Keanu noticed something else. The car was too warm. It felt like the heater had been running for a long time. But why? If Benjamin had just stopped the car, it shouldn't be this warm. That meant he had been sitting here before Keanu got in, keeping the engine running. Keanu's eyes shifted to the rearview mirror. The back seat was dark, but he tried to look for any movement. Then a soft sound reached his ears, a quiet rustling noise, like someone opening a package very carefully. His body tensed. He couldn't see anything, but that sound made him uneasy. It wasn't just the sound of an empty car settling. There was something, or someone. Benjamin's voice broke the silence. "Are you getting out here, Mr. Reeves?" His tone was neutral, but something about it felt off. Too stiff, too controlled. Keanu hesitated. He wanted to stay to figure out what was happening. But he didn't have a real reason to question Benjamin yet. So he just nodded. "Yeah. Thanks, Benjamin." He grabbed his bag and stepped out of the car into the cold night air. He walked a few steps, but something inside him told him to stop. He turned back and glanced at Benjamin through the car window. Benjamin was still sitting there, not moving. Then Keanu saw him press something on the dashboard and quickly checked the rearview mirror, like he was making sure Keanu was gone. Keanu's gut told him something was wrong. He didn't know what it was, but the feeling wouldn't leave him. Taking a deep breath, he walked home. But one thing was certain. This wasn't over. That night, Keanu lay in bed, unable to sleep. His mind kept replaying what had happened. The too warm car. The teddy bear. The rustling sound in the back seat. Benjamin's nervous glances. His strange habit of stopping in the same spot every night. Maybe Keanu was just imagining things. Maybe he was too tired and seeing patterns where there were none. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Keanu had always trusted his instincts. When something felt wrong, it usually was. He sat up, rubbing his face with his hands. There was only one way to put his mind at ease. He had to go back and see for himself. He grabbed his jacket and keys and headed out. The city was almost empty at this hour. Only a few cars passed by. The air was colder now. Keanu drove slowly, his heart pounding as he approached the street where Benjamin always stopped. And there it was, Benjamin's car, still parked in the exact same spot. Keanu turned off his headlights and pulled over at a distance, making sure he wasn't seen. He watched carefully. Benjamin was awake, staring straight ahead, deep in thought. If he had a home, he should have been there by now. But he wasn't. He was still here in the same place, as if he was waiting for something. Then Keanu saw another car approach and stop near the gas station. A woman got out, carrying something in her arms. Keanu leaned forward, watching closely. Benjamin stepped out of his car and walked toward the woman. They spoke quickly. Then Keanu saw it. Benjamin opened the back door of his car and carefully took something from the woman's arms. A child. Keanu's eyes widened in shock. Benjamin held the small child gently, wrapping them in a jacket to keep them warm. At that moment, everything clicked. The warm car. The same stops every night. The teddy bear was left behind. Benjamin wasn't just stopping here to take a break. He was waiting. Keanu gripped the steering wheel, his heart racing. He didn't know the full story yet, but one thing was clear. Benjamin was hiding something. And Keanu needed to find out what. Keanu drove home, but his mind was still back in that parking lot. He couldn't forget the image of Benjamin holding the child. Who was the child? Why was Benjamin meeting this woman every night? When Keanu arrived home, he collapsed onto his couch, staring at the ceiling. He tried to tell himself that it wasn't his business. Benjamin was just his driver. But deep inside, he knew he couldn't ignore this. And as he lay there, thinking, a memory from the past started to surface. A memory from before he was famous. Before the money. Before the red carpets. A memory that told him, sometimes you can't just walk away when something feels wrong. Keanu knew what it felt like to be lost. He remembered the cold nights in Toronto when he had nowhere to go. Sometimes he crashed on friends' couches. Other times he slept in his car. It was lonely and it was scary. He never knew what the next day would bring, and he always worried that tomorrow might be worse than today. But there was one moment that changed everything. He remembered a face, the face of a man who did something simple but life-changing. Keanu never knew his name, but he would never forget what the man did. The man owned a small car repair shop. One day when Keanu was struggling the most, that man gave him work. It wasn't a real job, just little tasks, changing tires, organizing tools, sweeping the floor. But it was enough. It gave Keanu a small chance to save money to get back on his feet. That man didn't just hand him money, he gave him dignity. That was when Keanu realized that helping someone meant more than just giving them money. It meant giving them a real chance to change their life. Now, lying on his couch and staring at the ceiling, Keanu thought about Benjamin. Something about Benjamin's situation bothered him, and he didn't know why, until it hit him. Benjamin reminded him of himself, of the person he used to be. Keanu sighed and rubbed his face. If he ignored what he had seen, Benjamin and his daughter would keep struggling. But if he did something, what could he do? How could he help? He sat there for a long time thinking. He was torn between helping and staying out of it. He knew some people didn't like accepting help. They wanted to figure things out on their own. But Keanu also knew what it felt like to have no way out. Finally, he made a choice. Tomorrow he will talk to Benjamin. No matter what, he wasn't going to let him keep living like this. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in golden and orange colors. Keanu looked out his window, but his mind was somewhere else. He kept thinking about Benjamin, about the way he held his child so tightly. He had already decided to help. Now he just needed to find the best way to do it. Keanu picked up his phone and sent a message to Benjamin. Pick me up at 7 p.m. I feel like having dinner somewhere different tonight. Benjamin replied quickly, just as he always did. Yes, Mr. Reeves. Keanu stared at the screen for a moment before putting the phone away. He had to be careful. He couldn't just offer Benjamin help. It might make him feel weak. He had to do it in a way that Benjamin could accept with pride. And Keanu already had a plan. At exactly 7 p.m., Benjamin's black car pulled up in front of the building. Keanu stepped in and greeted him with a small smile. Good evening, Benjamin. Benjamin nodded. Good evening, Mr. Reeves. Where to? Keanu pretended to think. I feel like eating somewhere cozy tonight. Do you know a restaurant that's family-friendly, has good food, and no paparazzi? Benjamin thought for a moment before nodding. I know a small Italian place downtown. The food is great. It's not fancy, but it's warm and welcoming. Keanu smiled. Perfect. Let's go there. As Benjamin drove, Keanu watched him carefully. He looked exhausted. The way he gripped the steering wheel, the way his eyes blinked slower than usual, Keanu recognized those signs. He had seen them in himself before. Keanu wanted to ask if he was okay, but he knew it wasn't the right time. He had to wait for the right moment. The restaurant was exactly as Benjamin had described. Small, cozy, and inviting. The soft lights made it feel like home, and the delicious smell of fresh tomato sauce filled the air. They took a seat by the window and a waiter quickly brought menus. Keanu, always careful to avoid attention, pulled his cap lower and kept his head down. Benjamin studied the menu carefully, too carefully. Keanu noticed the hesitation. He knew that look. It was the same way he used to look at menus when money was tight, trying to choose something affordable, something that wouldn't leave his pockets empty. Keanu ordered his food quickly, pasta and a glass of wine. Then he turned his attention to Benjamin, who was still hesitating. "Order whatever you want," Keanu said casually. Benjamin nodded slowly and picked a simple dish with a glass of water. They sat in silence for a moment before Keanu spoke. "How long have you been driving for me, Benjamin?" Benjamin thought for a moment. "A little over 2 years, sir." Keanu smiled slightly. "Call me Keanu." Benjamin nodded but didn't say anything. Keanu continued, "Do you like the job?" Benjamin let out a small smile. "I do. You're a good boss." "Thank you," Keanu said. "But I meant the job itself." Benjamin was quiet for a moment before he replied. "It's honest work. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest." Keanu could tell that Benjamin wanted to say more, but he held back. "And outside of work? How's life?" Benjamin stirred his fork in his plate, avoiding eye contact. "Surviving," he said simply. That one word hung heavy in the air. Keanu knew he couldn't push too hard, so he changed his approach. "You know, Benjamin," Keanu began, looking out the window, "when I was younger, I went through some really tough times." Benjamin looked up, curious. "I know what it's like to sleep in a car. I know what it's like to not know where your next meal is coming from." Benjamin sat very still, listening. "People think Hollywood is all glamour," Keanu continued, "but before all this, I was just trying to survive." Benjamin took a deep breath as if absorbing every word. "During that time, a man came along and gave me a chance. He didn't give me money. He gave me work. He gave me dignity." Silence filled the space between them. Then Keanu looked at Benjamin carefully. "You don't have to tell me anything, but I know something's wrong. I'm not blind." Benjamin lowered his eyes. "Keanu." He hesitated. Keanu interrupted gently. "Just tell me one thing. Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" Benjamin closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "Yes." Keanu noticed the hesitation. "In your car?" he asked directly. Benjamin swallowed hard. "Yes." Keanu sighed deeply. "And your daughter?" Benjamin's eyes widened in shock. His expression tensed. How do you know?" Keanu leaned forward. "Because I pay attention. Because something didn't add up. Because I've been there." Benjamin rubbed his face, looking embarrassed. "I didn't want you to know," he murmured. "Why not?" Benjamin hesitated before finally whispering, "Because I don't want pity." Keanu shook his head. "Who said I'm giving you pity?" Benjamin looked at him, surprised. Keanu took a deep breath and spoke again. "I don't want to give you charity, Benjamin. I want to give you a chance." Benjamin stayed quiet. "I have an empty apartment," Keanu said. "It's not fancy, but it's safe. I want you and your daughter to stay there until you find something better." Benjamin started shaking his head. "I can't accept that." "You can," Keanu said firmly. "And you will." Benjamin clenched his fists like he was fighting with himself. I don't want to be a burden." Keanu smirked. "Then don't be. Just think of this as a fresh start." Benjamin held the keys in his hand. They felt heavy not just in weight but in meaning. The cold metal felt strange against his skin. After so long without a home, after so long with nowhere safe to stay, he was now holding something that could change everything. He looked at Keanu. Keanu gave him a calm smile. No pressure, no expectations. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was just someone offering him a new beginning. But even though it was a good thing, it was still hard to accept. Audrey, Benjamin's little daughter, stood beside him, hugging her teddy bear. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could feel her dad's hesitation. "Are you sure?" Benjamin asked, his voice shaking. Keanu placed a strong but gentle hand on his shoulder. "I've never been more sure of anything." Benjamin looked at the keys again. He took a deep breath. Then finally he nodded. "Let's see the place." Keanu led Benjamin and Audrey to the building. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was safe, warm, and most importantly, a home. When Benjamin unlocked the door and stepped inside, he stopped for a moment. The air in the room felt different. He stood there just taking it in. For the first time in a long while, he wouldn't have to sleep in a car. He wouldn't have to worry about the police knocking on his window in the middle of the night. Audrey, on the other hand, was already walking inside, letting go of her father's hand. "It's huge," she shouted, running down the hallway. Benjamin watched as his daughter ran through the apartment, her eyes wide with excitement. She looked so happy. And for the first time in a long while, Benjamin felt something different. "Oh." Keanu leaned against the wall, smiling. "Everything you need is here. It's simple but cozy. And while you're getting back on your feet, you don't have to worry about rent or bills." Benjamin shook his head. He still couldn't believe this was happening. "I don't know how to thank you." Keanu crossed his arms. "Then don't. Just accept it." Benjamin let out a nervous laugh and rubbed his face. "You really won't take no for an answer, will you?" "Not a chance." Audrey ran back into the living room, holding something in her hands. "Do I have my own room?" she asked excitedly. Keanu smiled. "Of course. And you can decorate it however you like." Her eyes lit up. "Daddy, can I have stars on the ceiling?" Benjamin looked at his daughter, feeling his chest tighten. He never liked depending on other people. But this wasn't about pride. This was about giving his daughter something she had never had before. Stability. He knelt beside Audrey and held her tiny hands in his. "Of course, sweetheart." She squealed with joy and ran off to explore her new room. Benjamin turned back to Keanu, still feeling overwhelmed. "I promise I'll pay you back for this." Keanu smirked. "You already are." Benjamin frowned. "How?" Keanu nodded toward Audrey. "Look at her." Benjamin followed Keanu's gaze and saw his daughter lying on the floor of her new room, already imagining how she would decorate it. And at that moment, Benjamin understood. The next morning, Keanu took Benjamin to a small auto repair shop. "You know how to fix cars, right?" Keanu asked. Benjamin nodded. "I used to work in a shop before everything went wrong." "Good," Keanu said. "Because I told the owner about you and he's willing to give you a trial." Benjamin's eyes widened. He looked at Keanu shocked. I don't know what to say." Keanu smiled. "Then don't say anything. Just prove you deserve this chance." The shop owner stepped out of the garage and held out his hand. "Keanu told me about you. Let's see what you can do." Benjamin shook his hand firmly. "I won't let you down." Keanu grinned. "I know you won't." That night, after his first day at work, Benjamin came home. He walked into Audrey's room and saw her peacefully asleep. He knelt beside her bed, brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "We made it, princess." She mumbled something in her sleep and hugged her teddy bear tighter. Benjamin stood up and walked to the living room, where Keanu was standing by the window looking outside. "Is she okay?" Keanu asked. Benjamin nodded. "Better than ever." There was a long silence before Benjamin spoke again. "You changed our lives." Keanu smiled slightly. "No, Benjamin. You changed them. I just gave you a little push." Benjamin took a deep breath. The heavy weight he had carried for so long was finally lifting. "I'll never forget this, Keanu." Keanu patted his shoulder. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" Keanu looked at him seriously. "When you're back on your feet, when you're stable, help someone else." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then he smiled. "I promise." He held the keys in his hand again. He thought about refusing Keanu's help at first. But now, looking at Audrey, he knew this was the right choice. For the first time in a long while, they had hope. A few weeks passed. Benjamin and Audrey had settled into their new home. Benjamin worked hard at the auto shop, proving himself every day. Audrey started going to school, something she had never been able to do before. For the first time in a long while, Benjamin could breathe without worry. Keanu had stepped back, giving them space. He never wanted Benjamin to feel like he owed him anything. He just wanted to help, just like someone had once helped him. But what neither of them knew was that this act of kindness would grow into something much bigger. That night, Keanu stood on his balcony looking up at the sky. The world had a funny way of surprising him. Sometimes all it took was one small act to create something much greater. And as he looked at the stars, he smiled. Because he knew this was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories filled with adventure, mystery, and excitement. Your support means the world and it helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.